Futures Radio Show, sponsored by CME Group, the world's leading and most diverse futures and options exchange. CME Group's markets help individuals and businesses around the world effectively manage risk. For access to free educational tools and resources for the active individual trader, please visit activetrader.cmegroup.com.
Every day, traders and investors dive in to tackle the ever-changing markets to find opportunity. Futures Radio Show is your number one source for answers to the questions that all market participants want to ask. Veteran futures trader Anthony Crudele sits down with the most influential leaders and top traders in the industry. Now, here's your host, Anthony Crudele.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in for this episode with Kushal Thaker. Remember, new shows are posted on Mondays and Thursdays. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes and YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a review on iTunes. Before I play today's interview for you, I want to give a shout out to the great sponsors of Futures Radio Show: CME Group, Trading Technologies, FTSE Russell, RJO Futures, and Top Step Trader. To learn more about these sponsors and the important things they are doing for futures traders, be sure to click on their logos on our website. Today I spoke with trader and Specunomist Kushal Thaker. Kushal and I chatted about how he got involved in trading futures. He explains how he developed his fundamental strategy and how he executes his trades using fundamental analysis. Kushal shares with us his current positions in the precious metals, crude oil, and coffee markets, along with the fundamental reasons he is in these positions. Last but not least, Kushal explains why he is closely watching natural gas for a potential short position. So without further ado, let me take you right to the interview with Kushal. Kushal, how'd you get involved in trading futures?
The interest in the markets was always there from the beginning. In fact, from my high school and college days, I was very much attracted to the movement in the prices of the stocks. And somewhere my family was also involved in the stock market investments. And I knew that this is the place where one can actually make the billions and can have the lifestyle which one desires and aspires for. And that is what brought me closer and closer to the stock markets first. And eventually I moved to the commodity side of it because I knew that underlying having the prediction of the commodities will of course help me in complementing and supplementing my stock market predictions also. And it worked out that way over a period of time.
Let's talk about that period of time. Did you do any education, formal education? Did you read books? Did you have any mentors?
I had a lot of mentors over the years, but the most important person in this field has been a very close friend of mine from my college by the name of Lyndon Desa, who's currently a banker at the oil desk in Singapore. And he was the person who said, Kushal, you are one person who can trade the commodity markets better than most of the persons. The reason is the way you calculate the options and the valuation part of it in this market, which has absolutely no equilibrium. It is amazing. And he was the first person to take me to a ring of an oilseed exchange, and I felt I am at home. After that, there was no looking back.
So talk to us a little bit about how you went from learning from your mentor to then actually executing. Were you on sim? Were you studying charts? I know that you focus a lot on fundamentals. Talk to us about how you developed a strategy.
All right. So in the initial years, what used to happen, I used to rely a lot on the media reports coming in or the financial institutions releasing their research reports. I used to read them, analyze them, and jump into the markets to realize that the markets have already moved. And these reports have been second in hand, and they are not first in line. So I started thinking it is better I develop my own research rather than relying on the second-hand research. And that led me traveling across the world to understand what are the farmers' sentiment, how the farmers change their cropping pattern, how the geologists decide on where a natural resource asset is undervalued, overvalued, how to read those topographical reports. In fact, to that extent, I even took a small course with one of the satellite-based companies to understand how the weather is predicted across the world and how the wind speeds are used in calculations so that I can understand by seeing the images that whether we have an El Nino or a La Nina situation in a particular country and how the distribution of the rainfall is happening over and above how the irrigation systems have been set up at the district level too. So all this eventually became a year-in-year traveling, understanding, looking at the imageries and making the predictions of the market. And eventually I found that I was always ahead of the curve. And the institutions which used to release their own reports started relying on my information to make their own forecasts. And that was the point I realized I am ahead of them.
How long of a time frame from when you began your journey to learn about trading before you felt that you were ahead of the curve?
See, this is the 25th year of my trading. And I think I have always been a student because today also the world is so dynamic in nature and the markets are changing their directions in a much faster manner than they used to, that many times I feel my research is still falling short. Now, if I go back in time, I, of course, started trading immediately on the first day I entered these markets. Of course, losses were made. I lost a lot of money. I regained it back. And once I understood that this is how research has to be done, year on year, season to season, I became better and better. And I think it was the 6th or the 7th year that I realized that this is the way to go about with it. And after that, I have not suffered a year of loss.
So you're a self-funded independent trader. Took you some time.
Absolutely.
It took you some time to learn your craft. How long did it take before you were actually profitable?
I think the 7th year, I covered up all my losses and everything became profitable. And I have been building on it since.
Let's talk about your process, your strategy. I know that you primarily focus on fundamentals, correct?
Right.
Talk to us about how a trade sets up. Take us to the beginning of one of your recent trades, what you were reading, and how the process went to eventually you getting into that market.
Let's take the example of crude oil, because currently everybody is talking about it. Now, if I have to look at the current scenario that developed in Saudi Arabia, where there was a drone attack and crude oil shot up, everybody was talking crude oil is going to touch $100 and Saudi Arabia is going to have a hell of a time getting their production online. Now, if one even had to look at the video recordings of the attack, it was very clear that the attack was on the infrastructure and not on the oil well directly. Because if it had attacked the oil well, the oil would still be blazing. And then the production would have been lost. Here, the oil is still present. It is only the movement has been restricted. And within 48 hours, Saudi Arabia comes back saying that 60% of the production has already been restored, and the remaining balance will be restored within a week. And crude oil prices started falling below $60 once again. Now, in this kind of a scenario, if the basic fundamental principles of demand and supply are looked at, we are still producing more crude oil than what the demand is, because there is an inherent demand destruction that is happening across the world. So even if production cuts are brought in artificially by OPEC plus, still that will not result in oil prices shooting above $75 a barrel. Now, for every commodity, this is what I look into always: the top 10 producing countries, the top 10 consuming destinations. And I continuously run the economics of what is the inventory level, how the changes are happening in the production, how the changes are happening in the consumption side of it. At a particular price, is there a substitution effect taking place of another commodity coming into play? Because at a particular price of crude oil, it would be, natural gas would be a much cleaner substitute in certain industries. For example, like fertilizer industry across the world, they have shifted from naphtha to natural gas as their fuel source. So that again has affected the demand of crude oil. Now, this is the continuous process that I follow for each and every commodity in the world, and hence I arrive at a conclusion whether that particular commodity is undervalued or overvalued, and accordingly I strategize my position.
So it's as simple as undervalued or overvalued.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the execution now. Let's stay with crude oil. You have this macro idea, this macro theme. What steps did you take to start getting into the market? Is it outright futures? Is it options? How do you determine stops? Talk to us about that.
I always enter the market with futures only. Options I utilize if there is a little bit of confusion in my mind. But again, the concept is very clear that if there is confusion, it is better to get out of the market rather than be in the market and try to defend that position. It's better to go off, rethink, go back to the working board and re-enter the market once the mind is cleared. Now, where it comes to taking a position and the stop loss of it, usually I follow a very statistical calculation is, in a particular month, what is the volatility that commodity has given historically? So if the commodity has been volatile by 2% in a month, and if the commodity goes against me by 2.5%, I usually tend to reduce my positions.
So that's how you determine a stop. Now, what happens if the market comes right back to where you got in? Are you just continuing to get in because you believe in your macro theme?
Yes, I'm still looking at the fundamentals, whether all the productions, consumptions, the inventory levels, if everything is still in tandem with my conviction, I will still stick around.
Talk to us about how you start to exit a position on the winning side. How do you determine targets? And also, if the trade starts going your way, are you taking profits? Are you trailing stops?
Right. Usually, if the market is moving in the direction that I have speculated on, I will allow it to continue as long as I do not see a shift in the inventory levels. If I find that I'm long in a particular market and the inventory is still reducing week to week, month to month across the world, I will still continue with my positions. The time that curve changes, I start reducing my positions. I may not get out of the entire position lock, stock, and barrel, but I will start booking profits in a paced manner.
Explain that a little bit more if you could, please.
For example, let's look at some of the base metals. Whether it is copper, aluminum, nickel, the three most powerful non-ferrous metals in the world. If you look at the current inventory charts over the last 2 years, you will find that there has been a continuous buildup in the inventory in China, in particularly. On the other side, the demand has not been that much. The world is on an economic slowdown. There are no major infrastructure projects coming up across the world. If you look at even the steel industry is a little affected. Hence, nickel is not being consumed at that particular pace, except where some of the countries like Philippines are creating trouble where the production patterns and export patterns are concerned. Now, as the inventory levels are being built up in China, the prices of these commodities have slowly started coming down. In fact, if you look at it, most of these commodities, the three non-ferrous metals, are down by over 5% in the last 6 months. And that is exactly what I keep my eyes open to, that where is the production happening? If the production is maintaining its same capacity year-on-year basis, and on the other side, if the consumption is not able to maintain the same capacity at which the supply is coming, then of course the inventory is building up, and hence it is a good short in the futures market. And exactly that speculation worked out in my favor.
Do all of your positions have the same risk parameters, or are some positions bigger or smaller than others?
None of my positions would be more than 2% of my net worth. And at a time, I will not be taking more than 10 positions in the market.
10 positions in the market, no more than 2%.
Yes.
Hey everybody, I want to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors, FTSE Russell. They are a leading global provider of benchmarks, analytics, and data solutions. The Russell 2000 Index is a key benchmark for small cap U.S. stocks. Be sure to check out the E-mini Russell 2000 Index futures, contract symbol RTY. For more information on FTSE Russell and their products, please visit FTSERussell.com. Talk to us about some of the current positions you are in and why you got into those trades.
Of course, I am long precious metals, and in fact, all three precious metals I am long: gold, silver, as well as platinum, because there is so much of fear in the world that the precious metals is being invested into as the only safe haven that is left. The bond markets are too much in fluctuation and in flux, and that is the reason a lot of people are shifting their money, in fact, from the bonds and other commodities into precious metals, as well as people who are involved in the stock markets are also looking at shifting 10% of their risk capital into the precious metals part of it. So in fact, all three precious metals I am long in different proportions and at different pricings. I am also involved in coffee longs because I expect next year Vietnam and Brazil both to register a much lesser crop, and the inventory levels with the warehouses are also depleting at a much faster pace. So that is going to be a long bull run for coffee, which can even last from 3 to 5 years, because usually coffee bushes take a long time to mature again. And in that whole process, the coffee prices can spurt. Also, there is huge demand for coffee coming in from the millennials. And the shift from tea drinkers to coffee drinkers is being seen worldwide.
Now that one you have a really long-term, I would call it, perspective on it. So are you just in outright futures in that one, or would you use any options in this particular scenario?
In this scenario, I have entered into options of longer time horizon, but eventually I will move into the futures. I would prefer to roll it over quarter to quarter. That strategy has always worked out for me.
So when you have an idea like you do in coffee that could take, you're saying it could take years before it comes into play, you then will start off with options, and then, correct me if I'm wrong, if you start to see that the play is working, then you start to get in with futures. Okay.
Very much.
What is a macro theme that you are currently watching that has not yet turned into a trade?
Natural gas. I am looking at natural gas with the glut in the markets, and considering that whatever heat wave that was supposed to happen in Europe and America is done with, I expect natural gas to collapse big time.
What would be a trigger for you to start getting into a short position in natural gas?
I think 4 weeks of injection above 60 BCF would be my trigger point. I've already had 2 weeks of above 70 BCF injection already in. So 2 more weeks and I will take my call whether I need to short natural gas big time or not.
I want to talk about you traveling and developing these macro themes. I know that right now you're in Chicago and you're getting ready for a big trip to, I think you're going to Asia.
That's right.
Talk to us about your schedule and why you feel it is important to travel the world to help you develop these themes.
A simple reason that I'm an Indian origin person, and I have realized one thing, that the Southern Asia is one of the largest producers and consumers of agro produce. From China, India, we go towards the east and the south, up to Japan. Every country is a rice eating, a wheat eating, and heavy consumer of vegetable oils also. Now, most of these countries have their main cropping patterns or cropping seasons getting over by December. The harvest is also completed mostly between December to February, depending how close they are to the equator. And they are the ones who determine what is going to be the inventory levels worldwide, because their inventory levels are very important when it is added to the Americas and the Europe's figure work. And they are the ones, if there is a failure in the crop, they are the ones who are going to consume the most and import the most. And not only the grains, but even the pulses and everything is consumed at a very fast pace in these countries. And hence, being around that region, I get the first-hand knowledge as well as the first-hand visuals of how the crops are coming up in most of these countries, because I travel in and out of them, not only from the sowing season, but even on the germination cycle, when the crop is standing, as well as post-harvest, to understand what was the yield, the quality, what is going to be the farmer's sentiment of holding the inventory or to selling it off on an immediate basis. All these calculations I need to complete, and it is always better to be around in that region during this period to determine the correct strategy of the movement of each of this agricultural produce.
I love it. It's so interesting to me. Are you journaling all of these travels?
I do maintain a work pad. I do not maintain a journal as to which area I have gone to, but because it's a very standard routine that I have been following since last 15 to 20 years. And I keep on only noting down what I see where the crop is concerned. And over a period of time, my eyes have developed the pattern that the crop is good or not by just looking at them.
Very cool. Very interesting stuff. Great insight today, Kushal, but we are not done yet. I have some rapid fire questions next if you're ready for those.
Certainly. Shoot.
All right, everybody. Our rapid fire segment is sponsored by Trading Technologies. Trade the global markets with TT. They are the world's fastest commercially available futures trading platform. Now with integrated tools for advanced options trading, cryptocurrencies, and trade surveillance. Try it now for free at tryttnow.com. Kushal, first question for you. What trader has influenced your life the most and why?
Of course, it has been Larry Williams, the legendary swing trader. He brought my mind to understand how to trade with different time horizons. Otherwise, I was always a long-term thinker and would wait for a trade to happen, exit, enter. But he started telling me there are times where even if your long positions are there in the market, in between there are swings which you can adjust your positions to. So he has been a great influence to my thinking abilities.
What was one of the hardest things you had to overcome in trading?
My stubbornness in holding positions that have gone against me. I always used to feel I am right and I would hold on to those positions. Eventually, it would eat into my capital and I would have to give it up and I would sulk for days together. Now, that was one discipline which I developed over a period of time, that please give up the trades which are now completely against you.
How has your trading process evolved over the years?
Much disciplined, much more seasoned, with a lot of clarity of thinking and how to strategize my positioning.
What is one attribute that you believe every trader should have?
Conviction. That's it.
Favorite book about trading?
In fact, there are three of them, very much influenced by William Gann's book, How to Make Profits in Commodities. I have loved the fundamental analogies drawn by Alan Beatty in False Economy. And the one book that I keep in the middle of my library shelf is More Money Than God by Sebastian Mallaby. Because by just looking at the title, it inspires me on a continuous basis.
If you could pick one profession other than trading, what would it be?
Being Indian origin, I was very much influenced at a very young age by the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. And over a period of time, I have read a lot of religious books of all the religions of the world. So possibly I would have become a religious philosopher, if not a speculator.
If you could go back in time and give the younger you a piece of advice, what would it be?
All types of markets are the best place to achieve your dreams and aspirations, but one has to do proper research and accordingly speculate, trade, invest very wisely.
If you had an elevator pitch me your edge, what would you say?
My first-hand intensive as well as extensive research is my leading edge.
Last question for today, Kushal. What's your favorite thing to do when you're not trading?
Watching foreign and regional movies, and I'm a voracious reader on religions.
Kushal, what can I say? I had the pleasure of meeting you earlier this year. You're an awesome guy. You're not on social media. You don't have a website. And all I could say is I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. I've learned so much from you in the short time that I've known you. Thank you so much for coming on Futures Radio Show.
Pleasure is mine, Anthony. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to Futures Radio Show. If you have any questions or comments for myself or my guests, please visit futuresradioshow.com and sign up to be a premium member for free. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes.